Welcome to the Joey's Movie Blog podcast. I'm your host, Joey Strandberg, and we had another episode of The Last of Us, and this one was certainly the biggest deviation, but I think they really pulled it off with this episode. And I'm, of course, joined by my co host, Frederick Lopez.
Hello, everyone. Yes, they deviated completely. I have certain feelings on it, but I have to say it was another wonderful episode, the way this is written. And one thing I love about The Last of Us is it's not only about Joel and Ellie, it's really about the last of humanity and the relationships people have in this post apocalyptic world. And we got this little vignette of Frank and Bill and Nick Offerman. Ron Swanson, yeah, this episode had Ron Swanson in the apocalypse. And to trigger some people, yes, he does in fact kiss a man.
Yeah.
but but yeah, I love him in this episode. And this is the first episode we didn't get a flashback scene. Did you notice that? Like as far as like what happened before the outbreak?
Yeah, we don't get like the cold opens. We do get, I mean, obviously we do get a flashback, and
Oh yeah.
we get to see briefly kind of what the world was like in the early days. But this is like the first episode of the season that just jumped to credits.
Yeah, it was just like we pick up with Joel and Ellie right after Tessa's death, pretty much, and then they're just like getting everything together, trying to recollect themselves. And yeah, I definitely see Ellie being a bit more brutal in this. We're kind of seeing hints of Ellie the way she might be in The Last of Us 2 already. There's already seeds there, more than there were in the game, I would say, at this point when she comes across that infected at the beginning. Um,
I kind of took that as like she's very curious about the outside world. I mean,
that's
uh,
true because she hasn't really. I mean, they did that last week when they saw the buildings, and she's like, "This is how it looks like during the day," you know? Absolutely.
yeah, and then we do get a reference to the scene in the game where Ellie runs across the Mortal Kombat machine. uh, Obviously, we kind of know that's going to come back in the Left Behind DLC.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and we also uh, do get to see, and honestly, this is it. It kind of came full circle because, uh, yeah, in the episode when they came across the plane, we see them looking at the plane crash. Like that was the first ever shot we ever saw of the show officially released.
Right, right. I remember that. Yeah, it is a full circle moment in many ways.
Yeah, and like it was just yeah, it just reminded me how far we've come with going from like just looking for set photos of what we could find to actually.
It's insane because, like, just to realize that it's actually like living and breathing and right here on our television screens. And it's even more surreal when, like, you play a video game and then you hear about adaptations, you see set photos, official releases, first stills, and then it goes to this. It's just such a crazy experience with this story. And this is a timeless tale, to say the least. And they took some swings of the creators in this episode, some pretty bold swings. But I was talking to you earlier about this. In this episode, they really still stay true to the essence of what made it The Last of Us. You know, yeah, they do deviate from the game. There's certain moments we can talk about later in this podcast stream that could have been there or were hinted at, but like they stayed true to what the game was about and the relationships between human beings and in this video game, and that's much better than certain adaptations in the past. You know, like Resident Evil, for instance, or Uncharted. Sometimes they can forget what made the game special. You know, besides the characters, It's really the story. And I do like that even though this deviated, it still got the points across and still had the same impact on the characters like it did in the game, but in a very different way. And I think that's one thing that people who watch this episode, if they played the game, just take a step back. Because I had certain feelings about this episode with the pacing and stuff, but after a couple of days, I took a step back and you kind of have to look at it as a non gamer. Like, what if I never played the game? How would I feel? And that's one thing I think that this episode and this show's been doing great so far is that it still tells this timeless tale, even for non gamers, you know?
Even like when like they even make like feeling the outbreak just feel bigger. Like
Yes. And, you know, like, okay, so we've been getting more backstory on this world. To start off, we have Joel and Ellie, but like they show Frank, and we pretty much pick up with Frank in 2003 around the same time Joel's backstory started in the pilot of like the infected are already starting, they're already starting the quarantine zones. And that just felt so much larger, the town. Like, even though the town, we don't get to see as much of it in the way we did in the game, it still felt large seeing Bill, seeing Bill deal with this and then meeting Frank. Everything just feels so much larger here. And I like it too because even like the more intimate moments are drawn out a bit more, you know, that feels bigger because like in the game we're always like rushing, find something, shoot something. Here we really get time to like deal with the characters, but more importantly, there's situations in the world we're in right now. And that's a very good thing that the show's been doing so far.
yeah, like we and like we get the we start out with like this. So before the flashback starts, like they come across Joel and Ellie come across these like picked over bones, and like the clothes like these were like some of these people were like children. And
Yeah, that was such a haunting scene there. It like just shows you the casualties of like who's been lost, you know, these past 20 years in this world they're in.
yeah, then like we have this really interesting scene transition with the shirt, and then we're 4 days after the zombie apocalypse, and it's just this woman holding a baby being loaded up on this truck.
They have such good imagery here. It brought me back to like the first episode where like you had that infected child there and then you don't see him. They just give him that shot and then it transitions to like the body truck. It was just like, wow, so this is like before. It's such a good transition. Like the way this is filmed is just so brilliant at times. And then it also works thematically. Like they really have a vision of where to go with the story, but then also expand on it. And yeah, I really love that transition as well. And that was just kind of haunting seeing like children's bones. And in this world, there's like a lot more of that and just suffering. And before we get to like the rest of the episode, as tragic as this may be for people, whether you've watched the episode or not, Frank and Bill have like the happiest story, believe it or not, compared to everyone else in The Last of Us. Like they got a happy ending, and it just makes you think about all the people suffering, but then adds to like Joel and everybody else, like him and Tess earlier, where they're just surviving. Like, it's just a very, very abysmal apocalyptic future, and visually it shows that. But
Yeah,
I love that like whole 2003 opening with like the quarantine of the town. And I think Nick Offerman as Bill was perfectly cast. Like we really got to see a very different side of Bill here. And I know there's a lot of complaints online, but he's very much still the same Bill from the game. Like in the beginning of this, like he's still I could see him very much as Bill from the video game. And I just absolutely love his introduction and just like seeing everybody go into the quarantine zones because it's just a small glimpse of what probably happened across the United States after the start of the infection.
yeah, and I love the shot where you just see like it's such a great introductory shot where like you just see him looking at these like old monitors.
I love that. It's like in a silhouette. It's like behind him. You just get to see him in the monitors in that dark room. It's almost just like a silhouette. And I was trying to figure out like de-aged him or something at the beginning, but I was like, oh, this is cool. And you know, before we get into like the relationship aspects, metaphorically, that could also show you Bill is kind of sheltered himself in this environment, and who knows, it might have been an environment that wasn't exactly the best for a person like him. So he almost kind of lives again, even though it's by himself, coming out of his shelter in a way once everybody leaves and the town's like basically empty. You start to see Bill come out, and metaphorically, I could see him just feeling a little bit safer in this new world that's just his so far, with none of the worries of the previous world. And then, I mean, you still have like him setting up all the traps and stuff, and you still have like the infected creatures. But metaphorically, I was thinking about that. I'm like, yeah, I guess that could work. And I have to say, I would be just like Bill. I love that opening. I would be just ransacking a Home Depot or something, get my boat, fill up gas. Like it was just awesome
Yeah.
seeing him just get out of the house, just get a bunch of toilet paper. Oh no, the power went out. That was faster than I thought. And I love it. They have that song, was it White Room by Cream? And going a little bit political here, I also think a reason why people are triggered, and I love this, is that he had like a "Don't Tread on Me" flag, and it was like a conspiracy theorist, and he happened to be an openly gay man. I think that's what also triggered people. But I just love that. That brought me back to like Joker and everything with his character. But Nick Offerman, just like look at him at that beginning, is just totally Bill, and they did a fantastic job introducing him and introducing this town. And yeah, what are your thoughts on the opening?
Man, I just think it's such a great introduction for a character like Bill. Like, we kind of get to see that, like, he's very anti government, and how, like, he just hides in his bunker before, like, as these people are being taken away. And, like, and it kind of, in a way, it kind of reminds me of the scene in Home Alone where, like, Kevin McAllister, it's like his family's gone, so like he just has all this territory to himself.
I made my town disappear, and then just go to like the montage of the shopping. It's totally like Home Alone. I thought that too. I was like, yep, he made his town disappear, and then he's just like, okay, just get the montage of all the groceries.
But I think my favorite scene of the of his opening was the scene where, like, he's having his fancy steak dinner and watching his security cameras and just
Absolutely.
sees this.
I wonder if Nick Offerman has it in his contract that he has to have a steak dinner in whatever role he has. Because like I see him eating steak a lot. I'm like, yep, yep, he's totally just like enjoying this.
Yeah, and he just watches. He just like watches in glee as this infected is getting killed by one of his traps.
I loved his traps in this. Like his traps did a lot of nasty stuff to like creatures and people in this episode. Yeah, that's just like a total Bill thing to do, just to get like kicks and laughter for one of his traps, just like killing an effect. Is like, yep, that's right. They got caught in my bomb trap. You know, like I just totally imagine that as Bill. And this episode definitely was different in many ways with that. I love seeing this backstory because, you know, like you had Bill, and I would say even Frank in this episode is more of a character than he was in the game. But like Bill here, we get to see more of a backstory, and it works for not only this show, but say if we take the backstory of this and add it to the events of the game, it adds more to his character if you replay the video game as well, like taking this backstory into account.
Yeah, and then we have a 4-year time skip where we get introduced to Frank, played by Murray Bartlett. And
Murray Bartlett's great. Like he was in The Lookout and White Lotus recently.
yeah,
He did him and Nick Offerman like give them an Emmy for this episode and give this show all the Emmys already. I can see this show sweeping if they keep up the rest of the season, like the first three. I could see the show just sweeping it. But I love that introduction Like speaking of traps, he gets caught in like one of like what the holes on the ground. He gets caught like he like drops down this hole or whatever in the ground. That's one of Bill's traps.
Yeah, and then um Frank gets helped out, and he he wants his he's just like he's trying to get to a quarantine zone that was just gone. Probably
Yeah,
fell.
and then like it didn't even mention like there was like 10 or 12 people with him and he was like the only survivor out of his party or something. Like that's just crazy.
Yeah, and like and like that it's also interesting because like I wonder like did the quarantine just go into full-fledged civil war, or did it just get overrun and by infected?
That's a good question because it makes me wonder considering like if they go by the game we're going to have like the Pittsburgh Hunters pretty soon. Like
Oh
was it a
yeah, we
civil
would.
war where like there is like a faction like that maybe or like did the walls get breached and like did they get infected? That's a good question, especially with this new incarnation too cuz like now we have the vines that go in the ground. So like it makes me wonder if there was like something on the ground in one of the quarantine zones that like alerted the rest of the infected or something. That would be fascinating to see.
Yeah, and the Hunters is next episode, but because after the credits they play the
That's right. It was
preview.
a guy of like, this man needs help, and he's like, keep driving.
Yeah, and yeah, it's just like you could see the chemistry between Murray Bartlett and Nick Offerman just right there during the scene where he's just all like, "Yeah, every bum is going to come here for a free lunch, and this is not an Arby's."
Yeah.
Yeah,
Arby's is a restaurant.
yeah, and
I,
then
yeah, their banter was great in this episode. Like it, you know what I liked about this is that it felt very natural, and the relationship was also done in very good taste. I would say. Like I don't know why everybody is like up in arms. I'm like, there's plenty of shows like deal with it. This is very well done, in my opinion, with the relationship they have in this episode.
yeah, and then later we get, and then Bill lets Frank shower in his house and prepares him for a meal, and then you could like Frank is just enamored with it. Like it just like he just loves having the food and the wine. It's just he's just enamored. Like
It makes me
how
wonder because, like, I could go like a day without a shower and feel horrible, but he probably had like days, maybe even weeks without shower or food. And to him, this is just like a luxury where it's just like, wow, I didn't know I could still have stuff like this. This is amazing.
and probably not even like that good of food in the quarantine zone.
No, but I guess I don't know. Going to Frank's perspective, I guess if you did go through what he went through, everything would just taste good after a while. Where it's just like, hey, it's food. I don't have to like fry a squirrel or something or find something that's like expired and out of date. This is like real food to some degree, and it's also great with Frank. I mean, not with Bill. Like dealing with Frank and having someone there because you know for a while when they showed that opening montage, Bill was just like living by himself in seclusion.
Yeah, and it's just like, and like you could tell like similar to Joel and Ellie, uh like Bill is trying not to get attached, and
Yeah,
I think
totally.
I think they kind of keep going with that. Like, it's probably filler in the fact that yes, they do. It doesn't enhance the main story, but thematically, I don't think it's filler.
Exactly, because like I was probably gonna give this like a 7 out of 10 for pacing, but the more I sat back and thought about it, I'm like, there's a lot thematically here I was talking to you about this earlier. Like that's still going to have the same effect as it did in the game. They just did it in a very different way. And I love how they play upon relationships and attachment. And in many ways, it's that love hate message that The Last of Us is known for. And also, like, there's some parallel, or should I say, mirroring with Joel of who he's going to be in the story and what Bill is in this, like, one episode vignette, basically. And it's like the story is of like letting people in, accepting love or accepting people again. And there's a theme of like Joel is surviving, where Bill here, he was like that until Frank came along. There's that brilliant line they have later on. It's like, I was never afraid until I met you, you know? And there's a theme of like living. Bill got to live. And that's one thing they showed the difference of like Joel so far has just been surviving. He hasn't been living. And, you know, the video game, I'm kind of skipping ahead here, but like in the video game, Bill was kind of like pushing people away. Him and Frank had a falling out, and he pushed people away. And it was almost like a warning sign of for Joel of like if he stays by himself, he could be like Bill. This one's a bit different. This shows you the man Joel can be if he does decide, you know, to save that one life. And I think that further enhances, like you said, thematically the show, the relationship Joel and Ellie are going to have in this series.
Yeah, and then also the other takeaway is that Nick Offerman can sing.
Oh yes, that piano.
Yeah, but he was singing Linda Ronstadt's Long Time.
Yes. I love that too. And then, you know, speaking of like accepting love too, it's funny because like you could tell Bill is like afraid of opening up because of maybe his orientation or his like vibe against the government at the time and everything. But what's brilliant about this relationship is that Frank is the one that truly sees him. You know, after he plays, is he asks him, is like, was that for a special woman? And he's just like, no. And then he's just like, I know. It's like Frank is the only first person maybe that's truly seen Bill as who he is, you know, not as like this kind of label or anything else. And I think that's what makes the relationship so beautiful in this as a starting point, you know.
And then they bang, and then he get
It
another
was done
time.
tastefully. It was, if
Yeah.
anything, I thought it was too boring of a sex scene. I'm going to be honest with you. Like, all they did was kiss and cuddle with the. They didn't show any nudity. It wasn't. You've seen HBO's Rome. You've seen Watchmen. Hell, Game of Thrones had more. Like this, I don't know why people are losing their stuff. Like this is so tastefully done. It's just Nick Offerman and Mark Billette just hugging each other, and maybe yeah, there's a kiss, and he's like thinking, "I'm straight, but this script is good," you know, like maybe. But it wasn't. I mean, this is the 21st century. How many shows have we had? This isn't anything new. If people lost their heads over this, just wait until you see Ellie. That's all I'm gonna say. I'm like, did you play the game? But speaking of which, we were talking in an episode earlier about clues. I totally missed the whole Frank Letters thing, so I didn't realize they were partners. So it caught me off guard. I have to admit. But then I was like, but it wasn't off guard in a bad way. It was an off guard way of like, oh, there's a light bulb that finally hit my ignorant self that didn't collect all the collectibles in the game. Like that was his partner, duh, kind of way. But I love this backstory because it further enhances the video game, like I said earlier. But yeah, they're together in an intimate moment. There's a lot of that was probably one. As a matter of fact, I think they probably eat steak together more. There's more like dining room eating scenes than there are love scenes in this, besides some of the kisses. And then of course strawberries as well, strawberries.
Yeah. And then we have a time skip to 2010, and we immediately cut from the sex scene to them arguing about Frank's desire to clean up the town.
I love that line. The government are Nazis.
Yeah, and it also
now, not back then. You know.
Yeah, and I mean, it's like it's like it goes back to what I said earlier about Bill just being so anti-government and not wanting to open up, and then he says that he met a nice woman on the radio.
What woman?
Yeah, and turns out it was Tess. And
Yes.
I do have to say, rest in peace to Annie Wershing, who played Tess in the video
Absolutely.
game.
Absolutely. I can't believe that happened. It was the day of the episode, actually. Yeah, Sunday.
Yeah.
That was sad. She was such a talent going way too soon. And of course we had Tess's death at the beginning of the week with last week's episode, so it was nice to see her, but also see her and Joel. Like we got to see a little bit of more of their relationship because like Bill and Frank, there's definitely more to them in this show than there was in the game.
Yeah, and Frank is just very paranoid during the scene.
I love it how he has like the gun like with him on the table like the whole time, and then Petra Pascal's Joel's just like, yeah, I know I'm the same or whatever. It's just like
Yeah,
just gives that stern look, and he just has a gun with him the entire time.
and even then, it also kind of enhances Joel's character. Like they find this. It's like they find something in common. Uh, Frank is just, but like Frank is just very paranoid, and I got a feeling like the only reason like Joel is there is because Tess probably forced him to go.
Yeah, definitely. He just seems like he's just tagging along for a
Yeah,
bit.
and even but like he also is like, maybe we should trade some supplies like uh books, medicine, and machine parts, and uh they just agree that like they could set up some trade. And then obviously we hear Frank do the whole say like we need to start some signal like this music based system.
Right, with the radio that we saw in the earlier episode. Yep.
Yeah.
I love that. And also at this time, I forgot to mention, like with the traps, like it's crazy how he made like a gated community in the town with like the fencing by the time we got to that scene when like Joel and Tess had to like enter like through the security door things. He had like with a wired fence and everything. I thought that was really cool. Like he totally went Kevin McAllister with that whole town.
Yeah.
But that was such a great scene that added so much to not only Bill and Frank, but again to Joel and Tess. And it gives you more of the history of what went on during the time before the video game or before we start the story of The Last of Us currently.
Yeah. And then we have another time skip to the year 2013, which is the year the game takes place in. And they're just going on a jog, and then they find, and then Frank shows Bill the strawberry garden.
That was a nice little scene there, like that whole strawberry garden.
Yeah, and Bill, and then Frank, or no, Bill says that he was never afraid before
Right.
Frank showed up, and it's my favorite line of the episode.
It has so much not only to like love with this couple, but also like I guess even Joel with Ellie. You know, he lost his daughter. He's like a shell of his former self, but like maybe like it just shows you that in the world where everything is lost and it's just the last of us as far as humanity, it shows you the bravery it takes to just kind of become human again and have that connection with people, with everything, with life, you know. Everyone's like so disconnected and just surviving, they're not living. And it's nice that they showed this in juxtaposition with everything that's going on with the show. And it also gets me worried because if this was heartbreaking enough, you
Oh
do realize
no.
it's probably going to be the calm before the actual storm in this show. That's
Yeah.
why even with the slower pace, like yeah, I was kind of like not a fan of it at first with the slower pace, but I'm like in retrospect, we probably do need this downtime because stuff is going to get pretty heavy in the next couple of episodes. that we just needed this time to breathe. But it's also a welcome deviation in many ways. Because I just think when I watched this, I was taken aback because, they're adapting the game so closely that they did it differently. So I have to look at it, like I said earlier, as a non gamer. And I think, if anything, whether you played the game or even have not, this is going to get people curious about those characters in this world. And it's a nice little short story. I mean, this almost could have been a short film, really, like this episode. I'm kind of sad that what's his name, Murray Bartlett and Nick Offerman as Frank and Bill are only in one episode. I would have loved to see more of them.
Me too. And then later that night, some raiders come and attack.
That was an interesting sequence. I love the sound design, and just like, it's funny because like Bill was already out, like he already knew that there were intruders, but like we see Frank and he's just like waking up, like, what was that explosion? We just see like like all the explosions, and he's just like waking up. He's like getting the gun frantically, and then we just see Bill. Well, before we see Bill, we see what his traps do. Those nasty stuff, like electrified fences, flamethrowers, like people are getting burned, shocked, and then you just see him like in the middle of the street shooting people. And a lot of people were like, why is he in the middle of the street? And I'm like, you know what? Those traps were already going off. People weren't going to do much. And I thought it was a nice homage to video games, because how many, let's face it, do you use cover in video games? I know if it's me and Last of Us, I'm just going to go running out and like start shooting a bunch of infected or like different intruders. Like, I'm not going to be like behind cover.
I barely do, but like, but like he was just picking off the ones that weren't.
Yeah, there were some that the traps didn't get or they moved out of the way. And you know what I like too is that, like, usually in movies you see someone like get burned and then they're dead real quick. Those people were still cooking during that entire shootout. You just hear them like and just see them in the background where like Bill's having this whole shootout with those intruders.
And then Bill gets shot. And
yes.
At this point, like they with like the rain and everything, like I didn't even realize like they hadn't put like a time skip or anything. And then so like he's all like Frank, you gotta call Joel. And he's like, and like it was making me think like Bill was gonna die in that moment.
I know he got shot pretty bad, like in the side of his stomach or somewhere, and like Frank has to take him to like the kitchen table or something, a dining room table, and he's just like lying down there. That was insane. And we really got to see how close they've become throughout the years too, in this like montage of events, because like Frank looked very scared for Bill there. He's just like, this doesn't look good.
Yeah, and then I'm just like, no, don't die, Bill. And then the screen just goes to black.
Just wait, Joey. No, this, yeah, go on.
This, and then the next time skip was where just it all just like subverted my expectations with because then we just see them as older people.
Dude, like the makeup, I forgot to mention that, like the makeup on the show is on point. If not only like showing them a little bit younger, but like the age, it surprised me too, because there maybe, I mean, I guess Bill could have been that old. He just didn't look that old, but like it was definitely older than I thought Bill was gonna look when I first saw this episode. Like I thought, because like you look at Nick Offerman, and like at the beginning, I'm like, okay, that's like Bill from Last of Us, had some gray hair, but like they really aged him. And even though it was like the biggest subversion, like the diversion, like the deviation, I mean, from the game, it really, I think, added to the whole heart and central message of this episode and show so far. And did they already show Frank kind of ill when they fast forward at the very end when they're older? Or was he not ill yet? I'm trying to remember. Was he sitting down on the wheelchair yet?
Yeah.
That was a surprise, because like you saw him last time in like pretty good health, and then they just jumps to that, and you're just like, what happened?
Yeah, and according to the Last of Us podcast, It was ALS.
ALS. I couldn't figure out if it was ALS or cancer or something, but I figured it might have been ALS because it looked like he had ALS in the wheelchair and everything. That's rough. And oh man,
Yeah,
yeah. Oh, The Last of Us is just breaks your heart 6 ways from Sunday. That's all I'm gonna say. This universe is unrelentless.
yeah, and then he later like we kind of get a montage of what their day is like at this point, and then the next morning they it's like Frank just says like he's just ready to die.
That's where it kind of hit me heavy.
Yeah,
Because it's just like I want this to be my last day. It's just like, how do you respond to that? Like shit. It was just
and it was
that's
just
rough.
it was just like I'm tearing up just thinking about it, but like and like Frank just wants one last good day, and so they pick out suits and rings and get married, and it's like this just feels like I saw one meme where like the first 10 minutes of Up were
It
probably
totally was Up. It was Up. It was totally like it was just like an hour long version of that opening montage from Up. Yeah, I saw that too. Like it definitely had that feeling. And you know what's sad, as depressing as this is, like I said earlier, they probably had the most happiest life with compared to every other character that's going to have their lives in The Last of Us. Like they got to live on their terms finally in this like post-apocalyptic universe, you know?
yeah, and then uh they they get married, and then they just have one last steak dinner together.
This is a deviation that surprised me, but was also probably the most heartbreaking part of it here.
Yeah, like he puts crushed sleeping pills in the wine, and then
It's enough to
uh
take out a horse.
yep, and then it turns out that Bill had already put a dose of them in his wine.
That's what surprised me. I was like, they both take, so they're going to go together. I
Yeah,
was like, oh my God.
and then he it's like Bill just doesn't want to go out, and that it's like
He doesn't want to be
he
alone.
yeah
Like,
he doesn't want to let his story end tragically either, like
yeah, that's true.
and like Bill is also old, and it's like how long do you want to live in this apocalypse?
Because people don't get to choose how they go out in this universe.
Yeah, and then the last shot we see of them is them is Bill just wheelchairing, like pushing Frank into the bedroom, and then the door shuts.
By us not seeing, I think added more effect.
Well,
It's
because
just
like
like,
our last memory of them in the episode is them happy.
yeah, yeah. This is a deviation at first that I was like kind of miffed at the end, but then like I take a step back, like I said, as a non gamer now. And I'm like, I understand what they did. They still got the core central themes. Wouldn't it be cool if Bill lasted long enough to have the interaction with Ellie? At first, I thought maybe the pacing could have been faster, like in the first half, have this, and then the events of the game. But I appreciate this deviation because it still, again, gets the points across in a different way, and all the way to when like basically Joel and Ellie do show up, we have that letter from Bill.
Yeah, which is very, and it's just that it's funny because uh it's just funny because like the note that Bill left for Joel is actually somewhat similar to the Bill Frank left for him in the game, where it's like where it's like, it's like I, I liked, but Frank just not wanting to. He liked Joel, but like he trusted Joel enough to be like, when I die, I want you to take care of Frank.
Yeah. Yeah. I love the letter. Actually didn't read the Frank letter in the game. That's why I missed out on a lot of stuff in this. But like, could you imagine how tragic it would have been if they had this backstory and then shown the falling out and had him hang himself? Or like that would have been depressing too. Like I'm kind of glad they had a happier ending in this than they did in the video game in many ways. Even though we don't have like the bloater monster and the town, some of those interactions that would have been kind of funny to see with Nick Offerman. I still like it, and it does have that same effect. But like I said earlier, too, of like letting people in your life. It took me a while to kind of realize it because I was kind of upset about the deviations at first at the end. But then I was like, you know what? This was actually brilliant because they said the same thing in a very different way. Still got the same point across. It's still going to have the same outcome for Joel as a character. So even though we didn't see them, and I felt like it could have been faster thematically, I give this episode a 10. Like it was just great how it went full circle all the way to the window shot from the video game. You have that window shot from the video game, and then representing not only that, but the love that Frank and Bill had for each other during their most happiest moment there. Like that just was bittersweet.
Yeah, it was just.
But I also love that letter scene too, because like, oh wait, go.
I love that window shot. It's like Last of Us is like the king of those window shots.
It's like the main menu, and I also love too the letter of like that, like Ellie doesn't want to mention Tess because earlier in the episode it's like don't mention Tess, don't you ever mention Tess. She doesn't mention it, but I love that moment because that's the moment. Like in the video game, he was just gonna drop Ellie there for Bill to take care of. This one, it's the Tess moment of make sure Tess is all right. Like Bill doesn't know anything about Tess yet because he died. He has no idea. So like that's the moment where I think it changes for Joel. Of like he's gonna see this through now. Seeing that letter, seeing the mention of Tess, he's like, I'm gonna go ahead and like finish this, see it through to the very end. And we also get the gun and T-shirt from the video game for Ellie.
Yeah, we get their iconic outfits, and like normally I don't like it when video games are all like we must when like shows and movies are like we have to explain the origin story of this specific moment, but in this
it felt
one,
natural.
Yeah, it didn't feel like oh yeah, my last name is Solo.
Or like it's not like, I mean, I know they have their origins of suits and stuff, but sometimes it's like when you watch like big IP blockbuster movies and there's only a uniform or a suit that exists only to sell a toy or something, and they like build up around that. Like this made sense. It was just like there's her shirt. No need to create like a whole origin story for it.
Or an origin story for Joel's beard.
He ran out of Gillette Fusion during the apocalypse, so he just grew a beard. Yeah. I love Ellie just like ransacking Bill's place and just getting all this toilet paper and stuff and supplies. Like you don't really get to see that in video games. You have like an inventory, but they actually get to show you like how do they deal with inventory and items in this apocalypse. That's one thing you can't really do too much in a video game or show. Or should I say it's like invisible weight, like there's an inventory and guns and they can carry all this, but like you just see the character and like whatever weapon or item you have at the moment. So I really enjoyed that. And they had their conversation, even like the video game, even though it wasn't outside the house, they still had like a similar conversation between Joel and Ellie inside the house. That's one thing I love is that like it did take me a bit back since the first two were so close to the game, but they're still adapting it in a very, very similar way. A lot of it is budget. A lot of it too is, I think we talked about this earlier in one of the previous episode streams. A lot of it is like seeing what can work for a television series, how to adapt it the best for a TV show. And myself, even with my like reservations about the pacing and everything, I feel better about this episode than I did initially watching. Once I kind of take a step back and just look at the big picture of things and what this episode did for not only Joel and Ellie, but going forward as well. And it'd be interesting to see how close they stay to the game or how much they deviate going forward into the future. I think if it's done like this, where you still get the core essence of what made the characters in video games and motivations, I think it could still work. I'm just curious to see how much they're going to pack in for the first season. As much as I would have liked to see, like, are they going to repurpose Joel hanging upside down because we missed that and some of the other stuff? I don't know if it would have been fun seeing them find a battery for an hour. But like, it just
Yeah.
makes me wonder if like some of that stuff is going to be repurposed for sequences later, like that weren't in the game, or like they're in the game, but they're going to have like maybe he's fighting some people and he's like tied upside down, and they're going to see that moment, repurposed. It makes me curious, but yeah, overall, this episode's really growing on me. I still kind of like the first two episodes a bit more, but this was a very powerful story. And again, I just hate to see him Bill and Frank go out. I just would have loved it. Would have been. I think it was a missed opportunity not to have Bill there when Joel and Ellie were there and have the events of the game. But at the same time, I see what they were going for here. They just decided to do it with the love message instead of like the hate message. And for a while, I thought we were going to see Frank and Bill actually separate when they first were arguing, like they did in the game. But
Yeah.
this was done very well, I think, in a different way. Like now that I take a step back, it's like, okay, now I see what they're going for. I just think it immediately took me back at first because the first two were so close to the game, and I thought we were just going to get that. But I think I would feel better once you see it in the big picture of things. A lot of TV episodes do this where it's filler, but sometimes there's stuff that happens with other characters that enhances a story. And I also wonder, are they going to be doing this for the other supporting characters? It'd be interesting to see how they explore the other supporting characters if we get backstories for them, similar to how we got backstories for Frank and Bill here.
Yeah, like I really want like when I say I don't like filler episodes, it's not that I don't like filler episodes. It's just like I don't like filler episodes that are boring. And this one just had such, it was just carried by such great endearing relationships with two great performances from Nick Offerman and Murray Bartlett, and an incredible script written by Craig Mazin.
Yeah, like at first I was kind of like upset about Joel and Ellie's progression, but the more I thought about it, a lot of this still deals with them. And I think those are the best type of filler episodes that not only give you a great story on its own, but they do have something to offer for the character arc progression of the main characters. And like I said, I think as much as I would have loved to see more Joel and Ellie and their interactions with Bill, I also think as tragic as this is a calm before the storm, and I'm kind of concerned because this was heartbreaking enough, and I don't know what is going to happen moving forward in The Last of Us.
All I know about next week is we're going to get introduced to the Hunters and a new character for the show played by Melanie Linsky.
Oh, wow. That's going to be interesting.
And
Because they had didn't they have like a preview after the credits this week? I saw a little bit of that, and they showed the moment from the game.
Yeah.
I'm hurt. He's in the truck.
And I also believe that we're going to meet Sam and Henry at some point.
Definitely. Most definitely. I love seeing like all his weapons too, like when they checked out his radio security area.
Yeah, I mean, like, pretty much Bill is being the really smart one of the apocalypse.
Definitely. And yeah, I personally, like, despite my reservations about it, I think I would feel much better once I see it like straight through. Also, I'm kind of one, me personally, individually, like, I have to get used to the weekly model again. I'm like so used to binging stuff for like in a video game. Yeah, it's 30 hours, but say you're a Saturday off, you're playing and you're just going straight through, right? But this also makes me want to replay the games, and I need to collect more of the collectibles because there are some things I missed where I'm like, oh man, I need to like go back and replay that. I just did it like straight through one time. It's like I need to get all the collectibles and everything, but it's also going to change the way, like I said earlier, how I played the games, knowing the backstory of all these characters. It really adds a lot. It's almost like transmedia storytelling, where like, yeah, it's an adaptation, but this like enhances the video game to the point where it's just like The Last of Us is just one great story, a timeless story, no matter what medium it's told in, you know. And we'll just have to see how close they stay to the game or how far they drift. We'll have to see. Um, but it'll be interesting to say the least. This wasn't a bad deviation at all. Like, and it's a shame all the toxicity for one side or the other on this episode surrounding the episode, because I think it distracts from a very well told story and a very well written episode. You know, and performance wise, like Nick Offerman. I mean, could you imagine like Nick Offerman going from comedies and like Parks and Rec to being like Bill here and showing so much vulnerability and just, oh man, this was a very dramatic role for him that really showed us a brand new side of Nick Offerman and showed more range from him as an actor as well.
Yeah. It just they did. It's just like they did such a great job, and I'm just happy to, like I said last week, it's just refreshing to just not feel like your IPs are just being bastardized.
Absolutely, and I heard some comments like on some of the things I was talking about Last of Us. They're saying that it tended to get right with the characters what The Walking Dead got wrong, or like other shows that are similar, like in the
Yeah.
Apocalypse.
Yeah, it's like it, it's just like I appreciate that they're putting the characters, like it's like they have like the apocalypse just be the setting and then the characters and the relationship be the main focus.
Absolutely, and it makes me wonder, like I said, like with like staying to the game or not, I wonder how expansive it will get if we do focus on like more people and then like it becomes a bigger thing about the relationships of these characters, the last of us, the last of humanity, the relationships they have with each other. There's just so much opportunity there for a TV show. We'll see if they explore that. If they do stay like really close to the game on the next two, I also wonder if there would be like any spin-offs of certain characters. Not to get all like Marvel Cinematic Universe
Yeah.
over here, or like Walking Dead AMC with all the spin-offs, but it just makes me wonder because I don't know, The Last of Us is such a rich uh, story and environment with so many rich characters where if done right, there's a lot of possibility.
Yeah, it's just like I just think that it was a good thing that we didn't get what's the Sony movie, and I hope that other video game adaptations look at what Last of Us did right, and then uh,
Yeah.
learn the right lessons and give us something and give us just some more incredible video game adaptations.
You know what's funny is that like after the second Last of Us episode premiered, Amazon's already speaking to Phoebe Waller-Bridge about a Tomb Raider TV show adaptation, and I don't think that's going to be the only one. I think if The Last of Us continues the streak it's been having, I think more companies are going to consider adapting more video games into television series.
Yeah, like I don't know. I mean, like I know like a Jonathan Nolan is doing a Fallout show
Oh wow, that would be
for
interesting. I didn't know
for
that.
Amazon. Yeah, for Amazon. And then I remember a few years back they're supposed to do Mass Effect, but I don't know what the current update on that one is.
That one kind of fell off the radar like after COVID. I remember like pre-COVID they were like really pushing ahead on it, and then I don't know what happened. It just kind of
Yeah,
dropped.
I hope it. Uh, I hope they do that, and I mean, it's not much of a. It's not really a I don't think it's a video game, but like you got Henry Cavill starring in and executive producing uh, Warhammer 40K,
Yep.
which I know nothing about Warhammer, and I'm a massive fan of tabletop RPGs, but with Henry Cavill, not like Henry Cavill is a massive Warhammer fan. Like he's missed movie auditions because he was busy painting his Warhammer minis, and hearing that he's gonna have some creative control over the writers' room and all that just gives me hope.
It's like a fellow player or fellow fan just like having some input. And I would like to see the series, but who's to say they're all going to be as well done as The Last of Us? That's going to remain another story, you know.
Oh yeah, I think that we're certainly gonna have some bit like I don't think the curse is really lifted because I think we're still gonna get some we're definitely gonna get some stinkers.
No matter how far it stays or deviates to, I also say, you know what's great about Last of Us is that they focus on story and character. And I think in any, whether it's an adaptation or an original work, I think if you focus on story and character, no matter what it is, I think it's just going to captivate audiences and allow them to like explore whatever world it is they're viewing.
And that's the lesson they should take from Last of
Mm-hmm.
Us.
I mean, I know people who haven't even played the game that like or just like completely like hypnotized by this show. Like, what is this? It's like this is a video game I've been telling you about for 10 years. No.
Yeah, and it's just and then like not only that, like they're it's like the viewership just keep like it's a
Yeah, I got like
third.
yeah, it got like 6.4 million viewers, which I think was like a 5.8 the previous week. Like it's climbing, and that's a lot for like a show like this on HBO. Like that's a lot.
Yeah, and it's like the reviews are crazy.
Yeah, it's totally like acclaim. It deserves all the awards. I mean, it's going to be hard to see it be topped for me right now. And I know this is premature saying this. It's the best show of 2023. It's gonna be interesting to see if any show can come close to this, let alone topping it. Like seriously, to me, this is a TV show of 2023.
I mean, we do have Velma.
Yeah. Maybe Mandalorian, maybe Pedro Pascal can keep up. Just have like the Pedro Pascal protecting a kid universe, just like with Grogu, Baby Yoda, and Ellie. Just have him protect different people.
Yeah, and I mean, I need to watch Poker Face by Ryan Johnson.
I wanted to see that. Poker Face looked really good. It has a lot of stars. The main actress is funny. I was like, she looked familiar, and she was a babysitter in the '90s Dennis the Menace film with Walter Matthau. I was just like, oh, she was one dating Buzz from Home Alone. Yeah, I don't know why I thought about that. It's just like when you see actors and you're like, they look familiar, and you just like watch a movie when they were younger. You're like, oh my god, they're in that. Or like Pedro Pascal in like the second Kingsman movie. It's just like what?
Yeah,
You're gonna have Pedro Pascal as Ash Ketchum with Pikachu. You're just gonna have a little Pikachu. No.
They do a Logan style story with.
He finds Pikachu again in his backyard. I'll have to protect you again, Pika. I won the Johto tournaments 20 years ago. I'm kidding. That would be insane. But yeah, I still love this series. Like, I like the episode, but it's definitely growing on me more. But like I said earlier too, it's like it's sometimes a weekly releases, and there's been other HBO shows like that for me, like Boardwalk Empire or HBO's Watchmen. Sometimes I'd be like, some episodes like really action packed, other one's underwhelming, and I wasn't quite feeling it. But then sometimes I like take a step back and watch it like in a binge watch, and I'm like, you know what, this fits pretty well. It doesn't feel slow or certain moments, so like this is definitely one that I think is going to grow some more love. Definitely, once people have an open mind to the changes from the video game and just look at it like what it is as an episode right now, it's really a beautiful story. And Yeah, I can't wait to see what happens. I hope there's more action. I think there is. Like the more even though I wanted like a lot of action this week, is like the more I thought about it, I'm like, yeah, I think it's going to be heavy, but it's great seeing people who are non-fans just get their hearts broken with this episode. I'm like, oh, you think that's something? Just wait until Abby plays golf with Joel, you know? Just
Oh,
wait. Just wait until what happens at the next couple of episodes to other allies of Joel and Ellie. See what happens. Like, it's going to be insane to see like their reaction. But then again, I'm kind of envious too because it's just like we know what's going to happen in the game if they do follow like certain characters' paths in the game. But if they have never played the game, they're going to find out for the first time through the TV show, and it's just like this is going to be interesting to see, you know. Like I remember some people were like, "Oh my god, Frank hanged himself in the video game." It's like, yeah, but he was kind of like a faceless corpse. We didn't get this backstory, guys. Like it was kind of like a blink and you miss it sort of thing.
yeah. So I guess we're gonna end the stream here. Fred, where can they find you at?
Y'all can find me on YouTube at Frederick Lopez and on Instagram at Fred Film Fanatic.
All right. Thank you guys so much as always for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.
Till next time.